A city without a professional police force. How were criminals brought to justice? In Victorian London, a city of contrasts, the great and the good, the grit and the grime, and while it sat at the heart of the British Empire, underneath there was a hotbed of crime, poverty and suffering. So surprisingly, it wasn't until 1829 that London had a professional police force, and that was just decades before Jack the Ripper stalked these very streets. But for centuries before that, the foundations of law and order were both set out by Richard Lionheart in 1195. King Richard appointed some of his knights as keepers of the peace, and they were assisted by volunteers known as constables. But can you imagine a system of law and order maintained by volunteers? It was far from perfect and open to corruption. Enter the thief takers, essentially bounty hunters, who were supposed to bring the criminals to justice. Jonathan Wild, the self-proclaimed thief-taker general, who was supposed to be a champion for justice, but instead stole goods from victims and sold it back to them for a fee. His double life thrived until the public outrage could no longer be ignored, and he was brought to justice in 1725. Recognising the chaos, Henry Fielding, the Chief Magistrate of Bow Street's Magistrates' Court, took decisive action in 1749. He established the Bow Street Runners. These were government-paid thief-takers who worked exclusively for the court. They were a step forward, but it wasn't until the 19th century that a modern police force finally came into being. Fast forward to 1829, and this man, Sir Robert Peel, Home Secretary and future Prime Minister, presented an Act before Parliament establishing England's first professional police force. But why did it take so long for London to set up an established police force when cities like Paris had already done so before? Parisian police of the time carried guns and wore military-style tunics. English authorities feared a major uprising, similar to the French Revolution just a few decades before in 1789, so they shied away from such a controversial change in volatile times. So Peel designed the Metropolitan Police to be different. The officers wore civilian-style uniforms and especially were unarmed, carrying at most a wooden truncheon and a whistle. They were to police by consent and not by force, a principle that still remains to this day. Policing has evolved enormously since then. There were no fingerprints to take, no DNA tests to analyse to help solve crimes, and no surveillance cameras on our streets. Technology plays a fundamental part in modern law enforcement, but the principles set out by Peel are still important today. So what is the legacy of Sir Robert Peel? British police officers are still known affectionately as Bobbies, a nod to Bobby Peel, and most police officers still carry no firearms, respecting that tradition of policing by consent. The story of the Metropolitan Police is that of gradual evolution being shaped by the challenges of its time, but it laid the foundations of modern policing in London and around the world. Imagine walking the streets in a time without a professional police force. How different would our lives be today?